It is March the 4th, 2020. Welcome back to the Cage Rage podcast. I am Devin Miller, joined as always by Miguel Iterati. And this is a CRP news roundup. And we have three fights that have been announced that I thought were worth mentioning and covering on this podcast. We have to start with, we're going to talk about the world of boxing. Here's the headline from Dan Raphael of ESPN, Miguel. Deontay, the Bronze Bomber Wilder, exercises right to trilogy fight with Tyson Fury on July 18th. Where do you stand on this? It's definitely premature. He had to rush. Anthony filled us in. This had to be, I think, done within. I think he had to invoke it within 90 days, and then the fight had to happen within 6 months or something like that. That was in the negotiation. So he had to rush this. Obviously, I don't think that that's enough time to shore up the weaknesses and the holes that were exposed by Tyson Fury in the rematch. And I think most observers would say that he's already 0-2 in this rivalry. But where would you stand on the trilogy fight? Where do you stand? What kind of chances are you giving Wilder? I mean, obviously you got to still. I mean, there's still that X factor that he does have big punching power. But he was exposed in that rematch. Don't you agree?
Yeah, and I don't like everything that's come from the Wilder camp afterwards either. You know what I mean? Because there's been a tendency to really not give Fury credit where credit is due. He fired Mark Breland, who to me was, the only semblance of professionalism in his camp. I think he's got a lot of people that rah-rah him. I think that we've heard, the bottom line is he defended the belt, more than half a dozen times. So he deserves a rematch as a champion, as a fallen champion. I don't think there's any other fight out there that would come close to the payday for him, So, considering all that stuff in there, you can see, what is consuming his thoughts. But as you pointed out, with the holes and the exposure, that he was given in the last couple of fights, I mean, look at it this way. You're talking about Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, if I'm not mistaken, I think, they did a 15-round fight. They did a 15-round fight that ended in the 14th round, 29. They did a 12-round fight. That's 41 rounds that the men did. And you could look at it, and Ali won 2 of the fights, but you could look at that as, man, look, there's about 21 rounds Muhammad Ali won of those.
Mm-hmm.
Frazier won about 19 of those rounds. Now, right now Wilder's looking at maybe having won 2 rounds. Maybe. And, that's a big maybe because, as we've talked about with modern judging in boxing, when you have a moron boxing judge, you want to simplify things for them. So you tell them things like, if there's a knockdown, it's an automatic 10-8 round. So Wilder got 2 10-8 rounds in on Fury, and I'm not sure if Fury didn't work his way back to at least a 10-9 in one of those, So he's won 2 rounds out of, however many, 7 and 12, 19 now. 2 of 9, that's not good. So that's a lot to make up for,
Yeah, I was, not to interrupt you, but I remember saying that after the first fight that even if you give the 2 10-8 rounds from the knockdowns, I think it was round 6 or 7, and then obviously round 12, he would still have to, I believe, have won 3 or 4 more rounds on top of those 2 10-8s just to be a draw. There's no way he won that fight on points. There was even a draw.
There were judges that credited him rounds that very few other people credit him for.
Exactly.
And, so, I mean, with all the shenanigans, I mean, the thing is Wilder still, I felt, it's hard when you're talking about intangibles, right? And I was very much talking about intangibles, but there was something about the rhetoric from Wilder's camp, a little bit of arrogance, the speaking about killing and, the over-the-top nature of what they were trying to do. But, there's a desperation from Wilder and from his entourage to milk this cow for as much as it's worth. Mm-hmm. And they're really kind of shameless at this point over what they say. Firing Mark Breland, who's the coach who threw in the towel, and who's a former Olympian and a Hall of Fame boxer himself, like I said, the only guy there that I trusted was Breland. if you remember our pre-fight talk, I said to him, if he's got a chance, he's going to have to follow Breland's path. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
None of that played out. At the end, they disrespected the guy and they fired him. And I see that all as a very bad sign, and a sign that they haven't really assimilated this loss in a way that makes you think. I don't think he's got a shot in July. Yeah, he's going to have his puncher's chance, but
that's all he's got. And he's going to be hungry. But you brought up money, and you brought up that this is probably the most lucrative fight, and I would agree. But I want to throw another scenario at you because I know this happens a lot in boxing. There's a lot of boxing politics. We know that Anthony Joshua is fighting Kupropulov in the summer as well. We do know that probably the biggest fight that could happen in boxing in, this decade probably would be a showdown between Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, Wembley Stadium in Britain. And that's going to be the big money fight in the future for the heavyweights. What do you think's the possibility that this is boxing politics? Deontay Wilder does not want to fight this fight again in July that soon, but that he's evoking this rematch clause as a way to negotiate some step aside money.
I can see. I think when you hear the rematch clause stipulations that it had to be done fast and that the fight had to be done fast, not only the negotiations but the fight also. So now we're getting it promised with a July 18th thing. It's like, who put that in the contract? Whose team put that in there? Because who does that favor? That to me favors Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Although Fury's younger too, so it's not like Wilder could go away and remake himself at 38 or anything like that. But the idea would be get him a new coach, get him real. What I would be looking to do is something like hire Ben Davidson and spend the rest of the year with Ben Davidson, Fury's old coach.
That'd be ironic.
You know what I mean? And with the way the Fury team kind of discarded him, they might, for money, they might have a little bit of bitterness there, something they can work with. I'm just saying they need to do something. That may not be, but I'm saying they need to do something. And I don't see by July that they can.
On that point about switching something up, I did see Floyd Mayweather offer to. You know how Floyd is. He's very arrogant and cocky. He was like, I could show Deontay Wilder how to beat Tyson Fury. And basically what he's doing is he's reaching out saying, come work with us and we'll get you right. And, there's only so much you can do in 4 or 5 months.
Not only that, but the bottom line is Floyd, shut up. Here, right. Because it really is just a media grab. Floyd's not a coach. He's going to get people right. Show me, Badu Jack had a couple world championships. So show me the Team Mayweather guys. Ishii Smith, where are these guys?
Gervonta is probably the closest to that.
Gervonta, and Gervonta's not his pure baby. No. He came from the Washington, D.C. area, and he got associated with him along with the PBC. I'm talking about, the guys that are in Vegas, on the Floyd Mayweather team, are very, very, very hardworking gym rat type people. But they haven't had a breakthrough star yet. Not somebody who's grabbed the Floyd juice and turned into the next type of Mayweather kind of guy. So I would take his offer with a grain of salt. And and on top of that, not everybody can train a heavyweight either. So if Mayweather really was going to be dedicated to it, obviously he would have something to give. But you would be trying somebody new. I would be looking towards somebody like, I think the Ben Davidson idea is an idea that
I think that's the funniest storyline for sure. That would garner a lot of attention.
And it's like you're playing checkers with Fury, and for the first time in 19 rounds. Plus, Deontay Wilder just jumped two because he hasn't won the battle out of the ring. He hasn't won the battle in the ring. He hasn't done anything to shake Fury's confidence or to make Fury worry in any way, shape, or form. Not that hiring Ben Davidson would, but it would make him think. And I thought with Davidson and Fury and Davidson were kind of on their way to having a special relationship. It looked good, mm-hmm. And the breakup and stuff, I don't know. I'm feeling like the public story, there may be more there, And if it's the family's influence and things like that, and Fury coming back to the nest kind of thing, with Peter Fury, there's all kinds of potential there. But I think, I think if Wilder at least makes the phone call and says, "Look, what do you need for you need $2 million to do a 6-week training camp, Ben? Here it is. Boom, come get to know Alabama." The Rolling Stones recorded one of their best albums of all time. I believe it was Sticky Figures in Alabama. Have another brick come down and do some magic down there.
But you just talked about Wilder's lost the war, and his back's against the wall. We know that, but isn't his hands kind of tied at this point? Because we know how hard it is in boxing to get a fight made. And if he doesn't take this rematch now, does he ever get it? I mean,
no, he has to. He has to take it. And I mean, like I said, who does it benefit? At this point, I could see when Fury read that, he said, yeah, sure, whatever. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's likely to happen,
Does it still do big numbers?
Yeah, I think so. I think, Fury should do it in England. He hasn't fought in England.
I totally agree.
In a little bit, and he should force Wilder to do it in England. That changes things. And I think, I think it's interesting because I'm not 100% sure that Joshua and Fury is going to happen. Because the more time you leave that out there, the more time one of them has to screw up. Joshua may be more likely than Fury to screw up at this point in time, right? But the Pula fight's kind of dangerous. Maybe I don't know that Andy.
And you got Usyk coming up, who's going to be shaking things up in the next 2 years. We know that. So
yeah, and here's the thing: Fury is owned by Frank Warren in England and Bob Arum with ESPN on a worldwide basis. And when you talk about boxing,
they have an investment there. They have an investment they need to protect there too.
And even if they don't, I think they've got reason to give the cold shoulder to Eddie Hearn. I think that becomes a negotiating ploy that goes beyond just the heavyweights. And I think that you would even see things like they'll do business in other weight classes and things like that. But that fight may not materialize as fast as possible. I think Fury Wilder 3 happens in England. And what that does is I think Fury will attempt to take the step that Joshua's already taken, and that they might try to toss that into one of the stadium. That's something that not every boxer can do, but in the modern times, the George Groves and Carl Frosch series took a turn in the big stadium. Joshua's been in the big stadium. And I think Fury, with everything he's done, especially on the comeback and stuff, I think he if I were his promoter, I would give it a shot. And I would give it a shot without Joshua, so that way you leave no doubt going into negotiations with Joshua over, that you could also sell the stadium out. It's not just him, because he's going to claim the A side. And Eddie Hearn could go scratch, you know what I mean? And I think that will play into it more so than the urgency to make the fight for boxing.
For sure. It's taking its turn now to the world of mixed martial arts, a great bantamweight. We've talked a lot on here about the bantamweight division. We know that Henry Cejudo, King of the Cringe, Triple C, whatever, champ, King of the Cringe, or whatever he's calling himself these days. And we know that he's fighting Jose Aldo down in Brazil. And we know that was probably an undeserved title fight, even though the fight with Moraes and Aldo was very close. Aldo actually made the weight, which was impressive. Looked good. And he's a legend. He was a former longtime featherweight champion down at bantamweight. They're going to fight, and that's a done deal. Well, now we know that there's a lot of hungry young contenders. You got Marlon Moraes, who Cejudo already beat, but, I mean, let's face it, Moraes gassed out, and that's no excuse or nothing, but Moraes is a solid fighter, and he looked good against Aldo and technically got the win, and is still technically the number one contender in this division. But then you got guys like Aljamain Sterling and Petr Yan and Corey Sandhagen and all these different – and you got Sugar Sean O'Malley coming in now. So you've got a hungry young division. Well, you've got a great fight made here, and I think that this is a number one contender fight. And just because you know that Moraes has already been beat by Cejudo, and Cejudo is probably going to be favored to beat Aldo, I look at this fight more. You got Marlon Moraes fighting Petr Yan in Kazakhstan on June 13th. I look at this fight more as the UFC basically rolling out the last test for the hyped Petr Yan to get his title shot. If he goes in there and he beats the number one contender and looks impressive doing it in his first headlining fight, that sets up a good match with Cejudo or Aldo or whoever. I think their goal is probably Cejudo to fight a new, young, hungry, scary contender. I love the fight, and I'm glad that they're going to give it the headline spot because I think Petr Yan definitely deserves it. They gave him Faber last time, so they gave him a legendary name to get his name out, and he looked great, knocked him out, and it was on a big pay-per-view. And now they're going to put him in the main event with the number one contender. Do you agree with my assessment that this is really kind of just setting the stage for Petr Yan to be a breakthrough star? Or I mean, how do you assess this matchup, and what's your thoughts?
I wonder what the UFC wants in that fight. Because I mean, Petr Yan's he's got a head of steam going. But is he the picture of the marketable champion? And has the King of Cringe really just done enough that people want to move on? I don't know. I don't think Cejudo's exactly like Good Morning America material, like crossover material and stuff. So I don't think they put their trust completely in him, and they're willing to take a pause there and have a foreign champion. And Petr Yan, yeah, he's done a lot of good work. But again, I don't know. He's the model of exactly what they want in that weight class. I think it's going to be a good fight, and I do favor Yan. Moraes, I think we've seen just about him at the top of his game for the last little bit of time, and I think we've seen that the elite guys can beat him. So, we'll see.
You brought up a good point about Petr Yan's marketability, and we do seem to have that problem with the UFC now more than what we used to. And yeah, he's not going to be the crossover superstar as a champion, and I think that's kind of hindering him. But and do you think that we've already seen with Cejudo, he's already talking about he wants to go back and make featherweight great again. He's picking Aldo. He's jumping around all over the place. He's taking time off. Do you see him jumping in with a guy that, he's basically got to carry, even if it's a beast of a fighter, somebody like Petr Yan? Do you see him taking on a fight and even being willing to sign on to it if the guy's not a certain level of marketable?
Who's Cejudo?
Yeah, do you think he'll take the fight? Because it's a dangerous fight against somebody that a lot of casual people won't know.
Cejudo, like he marches to the beat of his own drum, right?
Exactly.
So I'm really not quite sure how he'll go on it because at this point he considers himself one of the top decorated champions of all time. I'm not sure I agree with him, but
not yet.
But I think in terms of where he wants to be with paydays and stuff, I think he thinks he's already achieved as much as he needs to, and he's been talking the talk, champ, and et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, a wrestler like that, with all those competitive, weekends under his belt, nobody competes more than wrestlers. Jiu-jitsu guys may have gym time and things like that, and the championships and things like that, but not wrestling meets every weekend while you were 10, 11, 12, 13, that kind of wrestler. That's the kind of wrestler Cejudo is. So I think if you can get under his skin somehow and challenge him, it's like, well, yeah, I can see, but you can tell him, I can see why you want to avoid Petr Yan. He's the guy who's going to beat you. And you can get him to say, no, not so fast. Then you may have yourself a fight. You gotta get, but I think the way he's sort of swerved in his presentation of himself, he kind of forgot some of that. I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's a very good fighter. He took on Marlon Moraes. I mean, when TJ Dillashaw went down to 125, and we can kind of create some benefit of the doubt from that. But after the PED violation, bantamweight was left without a champion, and Cejudo stepped up against Moraes, who was terrifying at the time. He 3 straight, I believe, first round knockouts, and I was calling Moraes in that fight. Yeah, and he really went in there and proved me wrong and became the champ. We haven't seen him since, which I think has been a problem with. But as you said,
except for on YouTube videos, which
yeah, really, his whole persona has changed since then. And that's a good point that fighting Jose Aldo is going to give him a legend on his resume. And it's actually a pretty dangerous fight because Jose Aldo looked really good against Moraes. He's got great
in Brazil,
He's big. He's got a ton of experience. That's not a cakewalk of a fight. Everybody's just throwing in the towel on Aldo, and he's going to Brazil. And then if he gets through Aldo and Jan gets through Moraes, then they're going to be able to set up Cejudo as the A side, obviously, against a scary Russian. So I think that's probably what's in the works, what's in the forecast for this, because they're Aldo and Cejudo are fighting in May. This fight's in June. I think it's lining up for a end of 2020 bantamweight title fight with Cejudo and Jan if all things work out. I think that's the best conclusion that we can read from this. And if we get Aldo, Cejudo, Moraes, and Jan, and then Jan and Cejudo, I ain't complaining as a fan. But we had another UFC bout now announced, another contender bout, really. Former, once again, the last guy who fought for a belt in a division, Dustin Poirier this time. Marlon Moraes previously at bantamweight, Dustin Poirier at lightweight. He's going to be fighting Dan Hooker, who just came off a very, very entertaining 5-round battle with Paul Felder. This will be in May, and it will, I don't know if it's going to be it will headline UFC Fight Night in San Diego in May. So you got Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker. I think this is a great fight for both these guys where they're at right now. I think Dan Hooker's been climbing the rankings. Poirier's the next step into the top 5, and Poirier needs a good comeback fight after losing the title bout to Khabib. I think this is a good matchup for him. And so I like this matchup too.
Dan Hooker reminds me a little bit of Darren Till. And I don't know, the career trajectory is going to be the same, but Till topped off against Tyrone Woodley, and he sort of looked a little flat and tentative. And, I thought Hardy won that fight. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm open to being wrong about it. I don't really care. I have no horse in the race.
You mean Felder?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought Felder won that fight.
So did I.
And, and I thought he fought a lot like, with some of the tentativeness that reminded me of Darren Till. I don't know if that's a good assessment or anything like that. But I think this is a tough fight for him. If he's going to come out tentative against Poirier, the thing about Poirier is he's had some time off. So hopefully he's been able to assimilate the loss because he's really got nothing to be ashamed of. He went into it as a good, strong number 1 contender.
Against the most dominant fighter in the sport at the moment.
And he gave him, he made him work. He didn't go down, in 2 minutes, or anything like that. So that fight demands recovery time for the body and the mind, but I think he's had that. I think we're in good shape with that. And now I'm eager to see if he comes in refreshed and wants to hold his spot, I think he's a notch above, Hooker at this point, unless Hooker finds, I don't know, another pedal to the metal kind of thing, another level, because if he chooses to fight the way he did in his last fight against Poirier, I think Poirier will take him out.
The problem with this division right now, and it's always been known for being one of the most, if not the most talent-stacked divisions, this and welterweight, is there's just so much already lined up for the next couple of years. I mean, we know right now that obviously Khabib and Tony are at the top, but then you got Conor McGregor in the mix. You got Justin Gaethje in the mix. And it's going to be really hard for these guys, even the winner of this fight, to really move forward toward a title shot. I think this is one of those divisions that superstar appeal matters quite substantially when you're dealing with those kind of names at this exact moment. And Poirier's got a real tough challenge to ever get another title fight after the way he performed against not only Khabib in the title fight, but the fact that he was flattened in a minute and a half when he fought years ago against Conor McGregor. So I think and he appealed for that fight. He tried to get that fight with Conor, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. That was at the bottom of my possibilities of who Conor was going to fight was going to be Dustin Poirier. I knew that would be. There's nothing for him to gain there. And he did already beat Justin Gaethje. He beat Eddie Alvarez. I mean, he's a solid fighter. We've known this about Dustin Poirier for a long time, but he's going to be in that kind of. We've talked on here about gatekeepers before. There's different rungs of gatekeepers. There's gatekeepers that get you into the top 15, they get you into the top 10, they get you into the top 5, they get you in title contention. And I feel like what we're going to be seeing with Dustin Poirier moving forward, because I think he'll win this fight. I think what we'll be seeing with Dustin Poirier moving forward is he will be that upper crust gatekeeper. Him and Justin Gaethje at this weight class for the next 2 or 3 years, that if you beat them, you're good enough to maybe fight for the title. And I think that that's the position that he's in now, and I think that that's what they're going to do with Dan Hooker in this position. That if he can get through Dustin Poirier, okay, well, maybe we'll start looking at you as possible title contender. I just don't see it happening. I see Poirier being somebody that's knocking back contenders, and I think he'll do that enough until they will stop setting up, marketable people against him, because I think he's good enough to knock back a lot of young contenders. But he's going to be getting fed some killers, some young, hungry killers. He's going to be the one that's getting fed the Kevin Lees. He's the one who's going to be getting fed the Islam Makhachevs. He's the one who's going to be getting fed the Dan Hookers, the Paul Felders. He's the one who's going to be getting these top 15, somewhere between ranking number 6 and 7 to 15 that are really good, that are on the way up. They're going to be coming at Justin Gaethje, and they're going to be coming at Dustin Poirier. So he's got a couple years of tough, grueling fights, and maybe if he wins 3 or 4 of these, maybe they'll look at him and be like, well, he's learned from his loss and he can get up to a title fight again. Tough road. When you lose those title fights like that, and you're not like a Conor McGregor superstar, it's back to the gatekeeper rule. It's back to the top contender who is getting met all the potential new title contenders. So I think that's the role that Dustin Poirier is playing now, and I think it begins with Dan Hooker.
Yeah, well, he shot at another title fight and proves if Ferguson wins. Only a little, though, because if Ferguson wins, you got to do the rematch and blah, blah, blah. But let's say
Conor is going to be all over that too. So,
yeah, but if Ferguson wins, interestingly, if Ferguson wins, you could still do Nurmagomedov and McGregor and intrigue with that rematch and go a different direction with your title, than Conor. Although Conor's always gonna have some say, I guess. But if Nurmagomedov were to take a loss and say go away, say he says I'm gonna retire, or he takes it bad, or he gets hurt, and he's out of the picture, Poirier Ferguson becomes an intriguing fight, and I don't think it's happened before, if I'm not mistaken. So even though some of these guys have already been in there with each other and stuff, that one's one that hasn't popped up yet. So Poirier should be sort of doing the Indian rain dance, hoping for that one to come his way, because that, as you said, if not, the road's going to be tough. And I looked while you were talking, and man, there's one thing that you can't beat, and that's time. And unfortunately, here's the diamond, Dustin Poirier, and he's 31 already. It's like, man, we've been talking about this kid since he was the baby. 25, 26.
And his moment was the Khabib fight. That was his moment to maybe break through. And
he was 25.
And he knows it. You saw it in his face after that fight. He knew that was his moment. And
yeah, no, and he didn't. He didn't have a moment in the fight he could say, fuck, if I could have exploited that moment. It was all, going the other way, uphill. So, that's tough. Like I said, that would be his best bet is, for things to get shaken up at the top. Ferguson opens up, and Nurmagomedov goes away for a little bit. And then Poirier becomes maybe a player again. But, and like I said, Father Time, he's 31 now, and I don't want to be a gatekeeper at 155. It's a brutal weight class.
I agree. This has been a CRP News Roundup for March 4th, 2020. We didn't talk about UFC 248 coming up this weekend because we already did our preview show. I highly recommend you go and check it out. It's on the Cage Rage Podcast YouTube channel. And Miguel, we will do a recap of everything that's going on this weekend come Sunday. So I will see you then.
Take it easy, bro. Nice talking again. And everybody hit like, subscribe, and check out the other stuff. Thanks.
See you soon.